Keeper, the latest by director Osgood Perkins, visionary behind Longlegs and the recent adaptation of Stephen King's The Monkey, which we have covered here. A man who has some of the best marketing in the game behind him over at Neon, but this movie took a very interesting approach with it. They tried to keep as much of the information about this movie, including minor plot details, under wraps, building anticipation through horror icons like Guillermo del Toro. So everyone thank editor AJ for fighting for his life to find enough footage to make this video work. And as with pretty much everything Osgood Perkins does, there's a lot of mixed reviews on this one. I don't think it's been quite as glaring as the pushback against Longlegs, but I also don't think it reached the heights that Longlegs did necessarily, but I think that's because it didn't outwardly promise as much as people felt Longlegs promised them. But with Keeper, it's that promise of nothing that really seems to build that interest. Like, what is this gonna be? There weren't any early press or fan screenings, or at least nothing that was like in time for reviews to get out. The trailers gave next to nothing, leaving so much to the imagination, but what that final trailer did do might have promised people a little bit more of a brutal experience than what was given. And I think ultimately people ended up expecting more, because when you have something that's giving you so little, you assume that it's holding a lot more close to the chest. So what it is giving you can't be that much, but then you watch the movie and realize that the trailer, what it is showing is actually some of the most pivotal moments of the movie, just without the context around it. I don't think it falls completely flat like a lot of people seem to, much like Longlegs, a lot of interesting lore to work with here. I like what a lot of the messaging is going for. I just think there's other movies that have engaged with this kind of premise better. Like if you're trying to look at that dynamic of women in relationships, I think Die My Love is doing a lot better at that right now, even though that's also a movie that might not be for everyone. I think it could have handled the folk horror aspects a lot better, and I will get into all that, but first, some no spoiler thoughts, or at least nothing that you couldn't gather from the teasers and the blurbs that have been available. Basic premise is that you got a couple who were going away for like a little romantic trip to a cabin in the woods, and then like weird things start happening. Now I think I've said it before, but I will say it here again, Osgood Perkins is such an interesting filmmaker because for all the issues I end up having with his work, I genuinely think the opinions on some of these movies are going to drastically change down the line. Like I know he has a lot of fans right now who are like, no, this is all genius, you people just don't understand, but I think that a lot of the people who might not be fully with it right now are going to be really into it down the line. And I might end up being one of those people because the movies, they always scratch something in my brain. I just end up wanting more. So, you know, maybe down the line, it'll click better. And I also think there's value in a movie not going the way you expect, even if I think it makes it a bad representation of a plot aspect. Definitely an issue I had with Longlegs, where I feel like they didn't handle the FBI side of that story well at all. Keeper definitely has a lot less of those issues, in my opinion, but it's also doing less than that movie. But I think it just works out to, if you're not a fan of Osgood Perkins, you probably won't vibe with this at all. But if you are a fan, I can't imagine you not also liking this. Though I say that, and I've seen a lot of people say that they really enjoyed Longlegs and found this one really boring, so mileage may vary. And while I wouldn't go that hard on it, yeah, it does just feel like a movie that's just scratching the surface of something that it never quite reaches. And I think a lot of that just really comes down to a misused runtime. Once things start getting revealed, though they were absolutely hinting at it way too blatantly through the entire movie, it all wraps up super fast. And it's not in a way that makes it feel like the tension is building in those first two acts. It's just kind of staying the same until we get to that conclusion. Definitely has the vibe of a more indie Sundance potential hidden gem horror than something that has a massive marketing campaign behind it. Tatiana Maslany is great in this, but I feel like the dynamic between her and the male lead just doesn't reach where it needs to for it to be convincing or compelling. Like, this is basically supposed to be the 1-year anniversary trip, and they don't even have the vibe as solid as the dynamic they have going in the movie Ojai, which is literally about two people thinking they're in a very different type of relationship. Malcolm's honestly just kind of off-putting right from the beginning, well before anything weird is supposed to be happening. And the more the movie goes on, the more I'm like, I don't know why she's into this guy, or why she trusts him, or why any of this is happening. Otherwise, I do love the intro scene that I'll touch on more in the spoiler section of this video. I feel like some people disagreed, but I thought it was a really good setup to I was really engaged from that intro. It had me interested. But the way the rest of the movie plays out just feels way too obvious where it's going. Maybe not the nitty gritty specifics of what Perkins is going to explore or the specific lore it's going to go with, but you know what is going to happen very early on, or at least know what the plan is very early on. And I use the word explore, but he honestly doesn't even really end up exploring anything at all. It just kind of ends up being an exposition dump at the end. It also has a lot of pacing issues. It's simultaneously a movie that feels like it's slow and fast because of how little it's giving us. I think that there was like an amazing short film in here, but there's also an amazing feature-length film in here if they had just done more. For some people, this might have actually hit all the boxes you were expecting, but for me, it's interesting enough, but I feel like it needs a bit more in the first two acts to really make it hit. Explore that relationship a little more. Make me understand why she's like into into this guy, make me understand why her friend thinks she might be a side piece a little bit more than just having things said out loud. Those are the basics. It's basically a supernatural style folk horror, which I'm always interested in, but feel they can fall short all the times. Like there was another movie that came out this year called Rabbit Trap that I feel has similar issues. Lots of great ideas that just might not have had the best path to explore them, but I'm happy they exist. Just like I'm happy that today's sponsor, Surfshark, exists. You guys know the drill by now. Surfshark is one of my favorite daily use tools and my go-to when trying to access region-locked content and protect myself online. They have thousands of different server locations around the world so you can make your internet think that's where you are. And why is that useful, you might ask? Well, I'll tell you. Say you want to catch up on Longlegs before checking out Osgood's latest, but oh no, it's not available on your Netflix. And gosh darn it, it wasn't available on mine either. But it was on Swedish Netflix, so I just connected to a server there, refreshed, and boom, Longlegs, but also Midsommar, which is a much better folk-inspired horror. I've also been traveling a lot lately, as you may have noticed, so I'm frequently on internet that might not be the most secure. With Surfshark, my data gets encrypted on public Wi-Fi, so I'm more protected on the go. Surfshark is fast, secure, blocks unwanted ads, and it even lets you generate alternate emails and US phone numbers to avoid giving out your personal data where it's not necessary to help cut down on spam and scams and more nefarious data exploits. They're also coming up with new features to help with that, like their email scam checker that provides added protection against phishing attempts with a simple click of a button. So try out Surfshark for yourself and get an extra 4 months free by going to surfshark.com/Jedi or by using code Jedi at checkout. Alrighty, so let's dive into those spoilers, meaning that I'm going right into the plot. I am telling you what's going to happen in this movie, so if you don't want to know that, it's time to dip. Because like I mentioned, I love the opening to this movie. It's just cycling through different women through the ages. First they're happy, then they're scared and upset, before cutting to their screaming bloody faces. Instantly setting up that someone or something finds these girls, puts them through the same process of like making them fall in love with them, and then kills them, following the same process that seems like it might have been spanning for over 100 years. Though arguably it might be giving us too much information off the bat. Before we cut to the present, Liz going to Malcolm's family cabin in the woods. While they're driving, it's doing these cutbacks to her on the phone with a friend, and it seems like she hasn't really had a serious relationship before, and this one is long for her at being almost a year in. The friend concerned that he doesn't really get her because he got her a beige cardigan in preparation for the time there. And the friend also seems pretty convinced that he must have a secret family or something without really specifying why she thinks that. Like, I guess he's a well-to-do doctor, but they don't seem that unmatched. Like, they seem like they're similar ages. If anything, he's the weirdo batting up. And those are really the areas they could have given us a little bit more to understand better why that was the dynamic and why her friend thought that. Once they arrive to the house, though, there is a cake waiting on the table, which almost seems to have like some blood smears on top of it. And Malcolm said it was left by the caretaker, but it instantly seems to unsettle her. So instantly we are getting way too much focus on this cake, so we know the cake is going to be bad news, or whatever left the cake there is going to be bad news. We even get some hints of something watching them from the shadows. She draws a heart with her breath on the window, and then something else seems to do that same thing on the window behind her while she's in the tub. The whole place is pretty much curtainless windows and doors that don't lock, so like things could be watching them from outside. Just a lot of haunted house staples with a bunch of like running water visions tossed in. And as mentioned in the intro, it becomes far too obvious that weird things are afoot. That's right, guys. Afoot. While they're having dinner, the doorbell rings, and it's cousin Darren who owns the cabin next door, who Malcolm said is an asshole. And yeah, that seems like a pretty accurate description. He pops in with his model girlfriend, who doesn't really seem to like him that much. And it's here, less than 15 minutes in, that it just becomes really obvious that the plan is for Liz not to make it out of this cabin. Darren just starts making comments about Malcolm being the slow romantic one, telling him that he can't wait too long and let this one get away. And with what we've already seen in this movie, that is definitely a literal statement and just way too on the nose for this early in the movie. So with it being that obvious for what it's setting up outside the specific lore, I really hoped that the movie would escalate the tension in a way that justified making it so obvious early on, but no. It's just her ignoring how weird this all is. And like not entirely, like she does think that Darren is weird and insulting, but isn't picking up on the real weird shit. Like in the conversation after Darren leaves with Minka, the girlfriend, Malcolm literally says it concerns him that he likes her so much. Not in a way that's suggesting that he's scared about how much he loves her. He's fine saying he loves her. He's just concerned about how much he likes her. Which is a very weird thing to say, and I feel would absolutely have people questioning what the hell that even means in any other scenario. If I'm dating someone and they say that, I'm gonna be like, what? What do you mean? Do you not expect to like the person you're dating? I don't understand. But we just float on by. So for me, it's like, oh yeah, he's got to do something that's going to result in her death, or he's going to be the one to kill her, and he's just surprised that he actually got attached in a way that might be deeper than the times he's done it before, giving me the impression that he might be the sicker fuck out of the two of them, even though Darren is an arrogant ass. Speaking of Darren, before he left, Minka just unprompted tells Liz that the cake tastes like shit. So when they start getting hot and heavy after that weird conversation, Malcolm shuts it down completely and is like, oh my god, the cake, you have to eat the cake. And honestly, even if we didn't get the comment from the girl saying that the cake tasted like shit, that's a weird thing to do. Then when he opens it and Liz is like, oh, I don't like chocolate cake, he still makes her eat it, but doesn't cut a piece for himself.
Eat it.
Hell no! I wouldn't fucking eat that. Are you kidding me? He couldn't possibly be any weirder about it. Then she even says she thinks it tastes like shit, but keeps eating, never asking why he isn't having a piece because it was so important to him. I get that it's playing on this idea that women do things to not be rude, and it's just another thing that feels entirely too obvious because they're trying to create more dread around things, but they're not really doing the best job of it. I think my good friend Art said that this was like Men Junior, and I maybe will have to agree. There are a lot of aspects of this that Men, as a movie that I didn't love, is still definitely doing better. Then in her sleep, she imagines the barrel of a gun against her head before she wakes up, devours the rest of the cake downstairs, and starts scribbling the faces of the women from the beginning in a weird daze. Oh yes, I forgot to mention, she is an artist, so it's not weird that she's just like drawing. It's kind of in character. So yeah, as expected, there was something weird going on with the cake. It's some kind of drugging thing, and Malcolm actually seems pretty concerned that she ate all of it and is just like conscious, even though she's being weird. Before he cuts down though, it cuts to Minka outside trying to get an Uber before she gets like rolled up into the sky up a tree from nothing that we can see and presumably consumed, which I'm guessing is also supposed to be the plan for Liz. So as I mentioned, even though Darren is absolutely more the like obvious upfront dick, it at least seems like he's not tricking women into full relationships before feeding them off to whatever this thing happens to be. For the rest of the morning though, Liz just feels weird. She's like seeing people off in the woods in olden time clothes when they go for a walk. They keep bringing back rushing water imagery and fish. She finds a locket, but they don't show us what's inside it, but she's interested enough to take it with her. And once they get back to the house, he says he has to go into work for a few hours because one of his patients isn't waking up. And instead of going in with him, she decides to stay there alone. Girl, no! She's still in this weird daze though. She ends up putting on the cardigan he bought her. She calls the friend from earlier to say that she feels like she's on a bunch of mushrooms. And once again, the friend starts commenting that she's probably the side piece and he had to go to the city to see his actual wife. And that she's not supposed to be like this, like some kept woman in a house. And that's the theme I feel like Die My Love is exploring a lot better in a way that actually makes sense. A woman who feels caged in by domestic life. Not a one-to-one, obviously. Die My Love is doing so much with the postpartum aspect of the story. That's one of the bigger aspects of it, and her wild nature going into having the baby, but it's definitely in the same area of what this story seems like it's trying to touch on and just not getting there. Keeper just hasn't done the work to set anything up to feel that way at this point. Like, they've been in this cabin for one night, and now suddenly she's being called a kept woman? Maybe she just wanted to enjoy the beauty of nature while her boyfriend went to a hospital. Like, God, don't worry, Darling did a better job with that theme than this did. It just kind of seems like Keeper wanted to get into that realm of gender dynamics while it's like throwing in the folk supernatural aspects, but doesn't really do much to make it work in cohesion. We'll touch on that more though. The whole conversation she's been spying on Darren's house and thinks she sees a head in a garbage bag seems to just be a hallucination. We get hints of shadows or entities moving around her and in the reflections of the house. She has more fish water dreams before she wakes up with the cardigan on backwards and Minka in the kitchen with her. Clearly not actually there because she's dead, and tells her that she's come from a distant past, but also tells her to be quiet or she'll wake the children. And that whoever these children are think Liz is their mother. So we got a lot more layers going on there, which, you know, they will kind of get into, before she wakes up again to find the cardigan on the right way and the cousin knocking at the door incessantly. Saying from the other side that what's done is done, that he brought their traditional libations. So again, I get that she's semi-drugged or whatever at this point, but this dude keeps saying really concerning things because he absolutely thinks that Malcolm is alone in the house and seems super confused that she's still there and that she's been left alone. Starts asking what she thought of the cake to suss out if she actually ate it. Wonders if she's feeling sleepy. Capping it off with him saying, Malcolm's right, you're not like all the other girls. Oh no. not and not like the other girl's comment. Ugh. So she's at least rightfully creeped out by him, but she still hasn't extended that unease to Malcolm, who's also been weird as fuck the entire time. I get that she can't infer quite as much as we can as viewers, because I'm like, well, clearly he's surprised that she's still alive, but like she should be able to suss out like a little bit more here. But she ends up going to the bathroom, and while she's in there, Darren starts creeping up the stairs with a meat cleaver, presumably to kill her because something's gone wrong, before something nabs him and sucks him up into the ceiling the same way Minka was nabbed. So that, combined with the ghostly apparition of what Minka told her, I'm assuming that for some reason, whatever entities are doing the killing feels some kind of connection to her, so they killed Darren instead to protect her. So there are interesting things happening, I just wish I did a little bit more with it, but we'll get there. She started hearing some weird noises in the bathroom. When she comes out, they stop, and she realizes that Darren doesn't seem to be around anymore. She calls Malcolm to come back sooner before finding Darren's watch in the garbage disposal. I also want to put a ban on anyone putting their hand down garbage disposals in movies from now on, especially ones that just started running on their own. Thankfully, nothing happens except for the fact that there's some like weird shadows following her down the stairs, and then a full-on hand reaching around the wall behind her that then like flitting by, which you assume is going to be another audience fake out, but no. She turns around and there's some woman there with a bag on her face doing weird hand gestures. She's basically like voguing or something. And then there's suddenly another cake there with a heart finger painted on top of the box. What is going on? At this point, she realizes there might be some cause for concern. She tries to call her friend to come get her, but then loses service. No idea why she hasn't just been like waiting outside after seeing a woman with a bag on her head that she absolutely believes is real and actually with her, but sure, we'll just stay in the house. I just don't know how many times we can cycle through the same build up to nothing. Malcolm does end up coming home earlier than she expected, but also seems very shocked that she's there. I wonder why that would be. She doesn't really take any notice of that, or even notices that he wasn't instantly trying to figure out where she might be in the house, calling out to her when he walked in. Just immediately says that she's leaving because there were people in the house. She starts to genuinely ask about the bag-headed lady as if this is someone he should know, as if it was like potentially the caretaker or just some person who bopped by for a visit. Tatiana Maslany is doing the best she can. Malcolm's not really taking this seriously though. His searching the house is very much like when a parent goes to find a monster under their kid's bed and just comes back with a bottle of wine. But we at least don't have to wait too long for things to start shifting. She asks about Mrs. Portnoy, who was the patient he was supposed to be going to visit and checking in on, but he doesn't know who she means at first, and it takes him way too long to recover from that slip up. So she rushes up to the bathroom, locks herself in. At this point, she's just like, oh my god, he is married. And then she finds this very old photo of him with a woman that's clearly his wife, but definitely not in the present day. So we know what that means. She's just mostly confused, and then he just walks in because apparently the one locking door in this house doesn't actually lock. By now you'd expect her to start running or being a little bit more concerned, but no, she just sits there listening to him as he tells her that he can't let her leave because she is giving him life. And for some reason, after he starts talking all weird, she still just assumes that he's lying about being married. I get that you don't want to think that super nefarious things are going on and definitely not supernatural things, but he's just flat out telling you what's going on and that you're probably not going to survive. Starts saying that the cake is supposed to make people limp with just one bite, but then she messed it up by eating the whole thing. It didn't affect her the same, so she's seeing more of what's hiding in the shadows. He specifically says that one bite turns the lion into the lamb. He's taking advantage of these fierce, vibrant women and breaking them. I just wish they'd shown that better. Bringing us into our exposition dump. The boys she saw in the woods earlier that day was her having this vision flashback of the past of Malcolm and Darren over 200 years ago, killing a woman for trespassing on their father's land. And that woman looks exactly like her. So I don't necessarily think this is like a direct reincarnation thing. I think this is just some kind of like generational echo where she's her own person currently, but there's fragments of that other life being fed to her at times. At least that's what I assume is happening, and it would explain why she's reacting to the cake differently. But the woman from all those years ago was pregnant when they shot her, and they just tossed her in with the pigs, and what she gave birth to was some kind of creature or entity, or many creatures and entities, which they see before they shoot her in the head. And then he starts telling a fairy tale about this fish that asks a fisherman to be let go in exchange for 3 wishes. Because instead of just granting itself its own freedom, it stays in the mindset that it's just a fish. So that explains all the running water and fish imagery. But he says that those creatures that are in the house and in the woods are just like those fish. They can't imagine their own freedom, so in exchange for eternal life, Malcolm and Darren periodically bring them sacrifices in the form of these women. Referring to him and Darren as the perfect little Westbridge boys, I have no idea if that name specifically means anything. They repeat it that way a few times. I tried looking up the history of the name, didn't get much. Could just be one of those things of like legacy and lineage and like your name being passed down and like what matters to certain people. He also tells her in this moment to be thankful that they aren't like the neighbors up Teacup Road, because compared to them, he and Darren are perfect little gentlemen. We will not learn about the neighbors up Teacup Road. But how dare you try to make yourself seem better by comparison when you're still just gonna kill her? On a literal level, the way this works, it would obviously make sense to pay for the service of someone who might take longer to be reported missing than women with friends, which I kind of assume is what Darren was doing. But with Malcolm, they're definitely trying to play up this idea of men who want to exert that control over women, not seeing them as people, more like accessories, just things to prop them up, going back to him being surprised that he actually likes her. And with Malcolm and Liz specifically, it's all just tying into that fear of not really knowing who your partner is, as Maslany described it. While still not really understanding who she is or caring to understand who she is, it's just a lot of false praise. He's saying the right things most of the time, but it never feels genuine. And I think those ideas in this movie are great. It just would have been so much cooler if it had played out more like a mystery of discovery and not a monologue. Like, there are so many moments where I could imagine them just tossing little nuggets throughout where we could start building it and not just have it be like given to us here. Because I love the idea that one of them actually feels the need to form relationships with the women, but then doesn't even have the stomach to stick around when they're being consumed. That's why he left that day. He's just a little bitch boy, a little piss baby. Not piss baby. Whatever, Liz is now finally freaked out, just begging to go back before they met, before any of this happened, which I totally get, because who actually thinks they're part of some supernatural folk magic to keep someone else young? And that they were planning to do it to you for a year. Finally, he just cuts in and says, "You're gonna die, Liz." But not even in a way that makes it seem super sinister. It's just a matter of fact. Like, and the only reason why any of this is working as well as it is because Maslany is giving it her all.
Let's go back. Can we just do that?
She finally tries to escape to find that the creatures have magically locked all the doors. She then tries to escape up the roof and gets plunged into another time-bending hallucination that has her looking at herself from the locket she found in the water. And then in that locket is the picture of the woman who looks just like her, which would have had so much more impact if they hadn't just told us that Malcolm killed a woman that looked just like her centuries ago. Whatever, who needs dramatic tension? Or any kind of mystery and plot buildup? Either way, that woman was some kind of witchy vessel to the supernatural. And while all that's going down, Malcolm is already like packing up her stuff into a box to put it next to the boxes of the other women he's already killed, as if she's already dead. Thinking back to the moment he first saw her in a store, and you'd think he'd avoid the person who looks exactly like some bearer of magic creatures that he killed centuries ago, but no, the arrogance. He decides to be the cause of this one's death too. Not even remotely thinking that those creatures that need to be fed might feel a certain kinship towards her because she looks like their mommy. Because that is what's gonna happen. Liz waking up in some sub-basement with an array of creatures coming towards her, very frocked and classic clown looking in a lot of ways. Then the bag lady crawls back out and pulls it off to reveal multiple faces on one head. And Liz says, "Oh, these are the children and all the women that came before." So I think that means that everything else around her are the children, the creatures, and that this bag thing is like the combination of all the women he's killed being put into some same energy, which is just so much more dark than just being eaten. It's like, oh, you faced a horrible death and now you're trapped in this monstrous body forever. I think it's whatever the creatures are putting in the cakes that like makes this whole process happen, that they kind of just get stuck there. They're not actually consumed or eaten or dead. They're just whatever that becomes. So even when Malcolm's quote unquote done with them, they can't even really escape him. But as you might have guessed and remembered from when they killed Darren for trying to kill her, they're not interested in hurting her. Just like that nightmare of Minka, they think she's their mother, and yeah, it would probably take a mother to love these things. Crazy designs though, props to that. There's like a whole shrine down here too. Something that looks like an old filthy oven where they might be baking the cakes. And then they show us that they still have the shot head of their mother preserved in what I think is a jar of honey, to which Liz just hits with a, "What the fuck?" And yes, Liz, exactly. Pretty fun though, because the opening conversation with her friend has her specifically say that she's never thought of herself or seen herself as a mother, and then just denying that Malcolm has 10 kids hiding in a basement somewhere. Well, look who was wrong. Then they all just start laughing, and then she's screaming, which Malcolm believes is her dying, so he just turns up the music, little bitch boy. But it's while he's sleeping later that night that things start to change inside him. He wakes up coughing, aging rapidly, finding himself on the receiving end of the creatures. Waking up strung upside down from a tree, aged to hell, with the audacity to ask Liz to cut him down. Sir, are you for real? Even tries to tell her that she was the only one he actually loved. That bitch. At this point, they both have those weird, like, bluish black glazed eyes that I think they kind of look like dead fish eyes, but she also has eyes like that. The past version of herself had eyes like that. And then she's just saying that the creatures asked her to stay. So there's like clearly some of that witchiness inside her now. Malcolm's realizing in real time that he and Darren didn't understand these things as well as they thought they did. They were just arrogant enough to think they had control over a situation. And that arrogance led to their deaths the second they didn't act in a way that served the creatures. And the second he realizes things aren't going to go his way, he starts yelling about how this is his house and his land, as if that matters anymore, as if it means anything. Almost like that idea of legacy as we just explored it in Frankenstein, his obsession with mentioning his father and his family name. It's just gone. None of this matters anymore. Tying into that status quo of the darker sides of our society, the predetermined roles that people fall into. But Malcolm's willingness to let people he claims to care about suffer for his own gain and not seeing any issue with that. The same way some men let women step up and bear the burden of the home while they go off and establish those dreams and legacies, often discarding them for someone new once they've drained them. I say all that and I see it in the movie, but I also just don't think it's doing a great job exploring that. Like, if you had told me that they had been on 2 dates and then she just agreed to go visit his family cabin with him, that would be more believable than them being together for almost a year at that point based on the dynamic in this movie. Back to the movie though, she forces him to eat some damn cake. I need to know why it's cake. And then drops his head into a tub of honey. Beautiful way to go. Love to see him suffer. I also wonder if whatever they're putting in the cake is part of what keeps their souls trapped, if that's actually what's happening. I don't know. I just want that to be the case because he deserves no peace. But I'm also fine with the cake here just being Liz flipping her treatment and subjugation back on him. And that's related to the movie. Liz's fate is a lot more ambiguous. Like I said, it seems like whatever witchy supernatural presence was in the mother is in her now, as you can see from the eyes. She'd said that the creatures want her to stay, so is she just kind of there now forever living in harmony with them, maybe planning to let them see their true powers after all these years to kind of like break that fish fairy tale thing? Is she in full control or is she trapped? You kind of get to be the judge there. Regardless, those good old Westbridge boys were the real evil all along, which was pretty obvious right from the beginning of the movie, but that's fine. That's fine. Because as much as I love that intro, you're already expecting the general outline of what's going to happen. To the point that if he was actually just an obsessive stalker killer, it might have been more unsettling. So there's still lots of questions, things I want to sink my teeth into a little bit more, to wonder what kind of lore inspired this, if there was like where anything like that would have come from. And just a lot of interesting ideas that weren't laid out in the most interesting ways, and just moments that feels like they were intended to be reveals, but we already knew. A lot of issues that fall more on the writing side of things than the directing, but Perkins had the chance to fix up some of those issues while filming and didn't. But all that being said, I still do not find this as bad as a lot of people seem to. I do just wish it had engaged with its themes harder, or at least played into the premise harder. As a folk horror, it's not really doing enough as a build-up, and it's doing way too much as an exposition dump. And as a social commentary and a look at relationship dynamics, it's not willing or chooses not to go deep enough with it, or build up enough to make it feel like Malcolm's actions come out of left field. Just never doing enough to have us feel the things that they're trying to tell us is happening. And it's not because of a pacing issue or that it gets slow at some points. I can handle a slow burn. Have you ever seen The Watcher? Not The Watchers, but the movie with Micah Monroe where she thinks she's being stalked? Now that is a slow burn that delivers while still having some flaws, but it delivers. So in the end, I just think that Keeper should have been so much more, and I think we have better folk horrors. I think we have better weird serial killer movies. I think we have better men dynamics against women and relationship dynamic movies, some of them in theaters right now. So I'm just kind of disappointed that this one didn't end up being better, but again, maybe down the line it'll click. Maybe something will really click for me and it'll suddenly super work, but right now it kind of works, but then I just see all the areas I feel like it could have been better. But if you've seen Keeper, let me know what you guys are thinking of it down below. Like I said, I know some people really vibed with this one. They really liked it. Some people just, as long as the vibe is good, they're in for the ride. I'm sure a lot of people really do feel things. Like I have a friend who like really felt the emotions of what they were trying to get across with their relationship dynamic. And then a lot of people who completely hated it. So let me know what you guys are thinking down below. I would love to know. But that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. All my other social medias are listed down below. Hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later. I would really like to get to 666 420 by the end of the year. I don't think that's gonna happen, but it'd be fun.